Hey folks, welcome back to another session with Two Tankers. Today we're going to look at part 2 of our QueenBee Pro CNC build. We're going to take a look at how to build the spoil board frame and then do the alignment and the squaring on the spoil board frame. So stay tuned. First step for the spoil board frame assembly is to take both of your 1,445 millimeter long 2040 rails, lay them flat on the table. Then I inserted 4 M5 T-nuts into each of the slots on both of the rails on one end. Once all the M5 T-nuts are installed, then I flip the 2040 rails over and prepare to put in the T-nuts on this side. Once I've flipped the rails, I take 6 M5 T-nuts and slide them into the inside slots on both of the rails so they mirror each other, as seen in the video right here. Once I'm done with the T-nuts, then it's time to install the end cap. Each end cap takes 2 M5 by 8mm low profile screws. I attach them to the end and tighten them down. Once those 2 end caps are installed, then I need to install the other end caps on the other end. So I will flip the rails over and install the last 2 end caps, and then I will torque everything down. Once those last 2 end caps are installed, then I will go ahead and set these rails off to the side for later use. The next step in the build is to take the 3 2080 extruded aluminum pieces and I place 4 M5 T-nuts in the 2 center V slots in each rail. The next part of the build is to install 2 angle brackets onto each of the extrusions that you have on the table. You will install them using 2 M5 by 8mm low profile screws, and you'll install them on the outside T-nuts that you previously inserted into the slots. In this part of the video, I deviated from the instructions a little bit. I thought it would be easier to install the rest of the L brackets for the crossmember supports, so I went ahead and installed the last 6 L brackets onto the rest of the T-nuts in here, ensuring that the L brackets or angle brackets were facing opposite of the brackets that I had already installed, or in this case, making sure the 2 inner brackets faced each other as in the video. Next, I took my last 2 2040 pieces that are exactly 1300 millimeters long, and I installed 6 M5 T-nuts on the short end, the thin end, on each of the pieces. So in this section is where I think we really get to benefit from that earlier deviation I'd spoken about by adding the 2 additional L brackets on each one earlier on than later on in the procedure. First, you just take your 2 outside L brackets and slide them all the way to the end. And you can lightly tighten them down, but still keep them loose. Then you take your 2 center L brackets and you would put them roughly evenly spaced across each of the 2040s. And then the next piece is we will take our 2 20 by 40 pieces that we just inserted the 6 M5 T-nuts into, and we will install those onto these 2080 pieces on the bottom. These are called the spoil board support frame. In this step, we'll finally install our side rails. These are the components that we installed the end caps on earlier. These will be attached directly to the 3 L brackets on the ends of the 2080 rails shown in the video here. Again, do not install these and tighten them down, as in the next step we'll go through squaring and alignment of the whole system. Alright, so here's a full assembly video. It's not the final assembly. Nothing is squared or spaced evenly, but I wanted you to get an idea of the massive size of this. This is the 1500 by 1500 QueenBee. So it is literally 59 inches on one direction and 57¼ inches in the other direction. It is a massive build. I literally had to clean off everything on the end of my table so I could assemble the rest of this and square it accordingly. Just a couple of notes on this for squaring. First, you want to make sure that these two cross members that are actually support members for these 2080 components, the three 2080 cross pieces, you want to make sure these support brackets that go underneath of them, the support members, make sure they're even with the edge of these on both sides, as well as your two side rails. From this distance here to this distance, once I calculated it out on mine, I needed approximately 75 millimeters for it to be even. So with that, I went ahead and set my digital calipers to 75 millimeters. And our next step will be to go around, measure the distance between here, divide by 3, draw a line on each of those, and then also move these in 75 millimeters on both ends, and then start tightening everything down. The ends here are very critical because that will ensure that your corners are square. But you'll also want to ensure that you have a framing square or something handy that you could lay on the rail itself, move it over, and ensure that each of the rails are square before you tighten everything down. To start the squaring process, I'll first use my digital caliper. Make sure it's set to 75 millimeter, and then find that distance from the end of the side rail to the 2080 beam. Once it's set, then I go ahead and check for square, and then I will lightly tighten down that one corner before I move on to the next corner. I will repeat this process in a clockwise position all the way around the entire frame. After all four corners are squared, then I move on to the center 2080 beam. I measure over 725.5 millimeters. I make a mark, and then I square up the center beam as best I can and lightly tighten down the bolts on one side. Then I'll repeat this process on the other side, ensuring both sides are square to the side rails. So the last two pieces that I have to align here are the 2040 rails on the bottom. They're the support pieces, the cross members. The measurement comes out to exactly 460 millimeters evenly in between each one of these extrusion pieces. So from edge to edge, you should have 460 millimeters on each one. I lightly tighten them down and square them up, make sure everything is even, and then I perform this exact same process on the other side. And the last part of this build is to then finally double check everything to ensure that it is square, the measurements are correct, and then finally I tighten down all the bolts. It's a good note here that the bolts that come with the Bulkman QueenBee Pro, they're really soft, so ensure that you don't over tighten them or you'll just strip them out. Just make sure they're hand tight, they're good enough, and also double check all of your measurements because the linear rails and the C-beams will bolt onto these here in a little bit, so you want to ensure everything is square and perfectly tight. All right, folks, now that everything's torqued down, I flipped the frame over, and that is it for the second video in my series to build the QueenBee Pro CNC. It's a 1500 by 1500 millimeter unit. Just real quick, a couple of things that I've found that are helpful along the way. Number one is get yourself a really good set of metric bullnose screwdrivers here. These things will come in really handy. A lot of the bolts that you have to get to them at an angle, so it's nice to have this. The next one is a really good metric tape measure. If you're dealing with measurements that are longer than 1,000 millimeters, it's nice to have a tape measure to measure that. And the next one is a really good set of handy digital calipers. These will help ensure the accuracy of your subframe build, your spoil board waist frame build, and it'll probably come in handy in many other aspects while I do my build here. So again, thanks for watching the video, and get ready for part 3, which is where we build the side frames and put on the linear rails. And again, as always, if you like my content, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.